On June 28, 1978, a brutal crime occurred in the city of Boston. 5 men were found murdered in the basement of the Blackfriars pub, a bar located at 105 Summer Street in the busy downtown Crossing shopping district. At approximately 8 a.m., the pub's janitor arrived for his morning shift, unaware of the horror that awaited him. As he entered the cramped basement that served as the club's office, he stumbled upon the bodies of the 5 men with bullets. The victims were found in various positions around the basement, indicating that they had been caught off guard. Some were slumped over a backgammon table, suggesting they had been in the middle of a game when the attack occurred. The police later determined that the murders had likely taken place around 2 a.m., shortly after the club had closed for the night. The victims had been shot at close range with both a shotgun and a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The use of multiple weapons suggested the involvement of more than one assailant. Some victims had their fingers completely blown off, likely from attempting to shield themselves from the shotgun blasts. Others were found with their scalps partially removed by the force of the shots fired at point-blank range. Among the victims were Vincent Solmonti, the 35-year-old owner of the pub, John Jack Kelly, the night manager, and a former investigative reporter, Peter Meredith, who managed Vincent's other establishment, Shepherd's Pub. There were also the remains of Freddie Della Vega and Charles Magarian. As investigators combed through the crime scene, they uncovered several intriguing details. A small arsenal of firearms was discovered on the premises, raising questions about why the victims were unable to defend themselves. Additionally, small quantities of cocaine and marijuana were found, hinting at potential drug-related motives. Perhaps most puzzling was the discovery of $15,000 in cash in an open safe. The presence of this substantial sum led police to conclude that robbery was not the primary motive behind the massacre. Instead, they began to suspect that this was a carefully planned gangland-style execution. At the time of his death, Vincent Solmonti was under investigation by both the FBI and IRS for bankruptcy fraud related to his business dealings. This ongoing investigation suggests that he may have been involved in financial irregularities, possibly to support a lavish lifestyle or to cover debts. Furthermore, Vincent was known to have deep connections with organized crime. He was a close associate and friend of Stephen Flemmi, a prominent member of the Winter Hill Gang. This association with Flemmi, who was also an FBI informant, placed Vincent in a precarious position within Boston's criminal hierarchy. It's possible that his relationship may have played a role in the events leading up to the massacre. As for John Kelly, he used to work as an investigative reporter before transitioning to managing the Blackfriars pub. He too was known for developing ties to crime figures to obtain story leads. Despite his associations with criminals, Kelly was not considered a known criminal himself. However, friends noted that he was drawn to the allure of the gangster lifestyle. Peter Meredith managed Shepherd's Pub, which was the other establishment owned by Vincent. His presence at Blackfriars on the night of the event was reportedly due to him coming to the pub after finishing his shift at Shepherd's. As for Freddie Della Vega, less is known about his background. Some sources suggest he was a major substance supplier in the Boston area. If true, this would place him as a significant player in the local drug trade, potentially connecting him to larger criminal organizations operating in the city. Charles Magarian was an insurance salesman, but was well known to be a high-stakes backgammon player. The Boston Police Department developed a list of potential suspects focusing on individuals with known ties to organized crime in the area. The primary suspects included James Bulger, the leader of the Winter Hill Gang, an Irish-American crime family operating in the Boston area. James was also a top echelon informant for the FBI, which complicated matters. There was also Nicholas Femia, who was involved in extortion and armed robbery, James Martirano, a contract killer associated with the Winter Hill Gang, Robert Italiano, a member of another crime family in Boston, and Stephen Flemmi, who was mentioned earlier. The investigation took an interesting turn when, less than a month after the killings on July 12th, the police arrested Robert Italiano and William N. Ierardi, charging them with the murders. Both men denied any involvement in the crime. William claimed he was at a wake in East Boston on the night of the murders, stating, "About the Blackfriars, I don't know nothing. I didn't hurt anyone. I couldn't. How could I?" Despite the arrests, the case against the two men was not straightforward. The prosecution faced challenges in presenting a solid case, and after a 27-day trial, both men were acquitted due to lack of evidence and inconsistent witness testimony. One of the most intriguing aspects of the investigation involved the role of James Bulger and his FBI handler John Connolly. After the murders, James allegedly contacted John requesting crime scene photos. He then used these photos to extort $60,000 from a real estate developer who had borrowed money from Solmonti, claiming he had carried out the killings and the debt was now owed to him. Stephen Flemmi, James Bulger's partner, also played a curious role in the case. His girlfriend, Marilyn De Silva, worked as a waitress at the Blackfriars. On the night of the murders, Flemmi reportedly told her not to go to the bar, raising suspicions about his prior knowledge of the crime. Another popular theory focused on Nicholas Femia. He was an associate of both the Patriarca crime family and the Winter Hill gang, and emerged as a prime suspect in the years following the incident. According to some accounts, Nicholas, along with Robert Italiano, William Ierardi, and possibly others, planned the robbery after learning about the large substance shipment at the Blackfriars. The theory suggests that the situation spiraled out of control when John Kelly, the former investigative reporter turned night manager, recognized Nicholas under his mask. Nicholas, who was allegedly high on stimulants at the time, panicked and opened fire. Realizing they couldn't leave witnesses, the other assailants then killed the remaining victims. Initially, when he began associating with the Winter Hill gang, James Bulger reportedly wanted it established that Nicholas had nothing to do with the massacre. This was likely an attempt to reduce any pending surveillance and investigations that might interfere with Bulger's own criminal activities. However, as their relationship deteriorated, reportedly due to Bulger's disgust with Nicholas' lifestyle and physical appearance, the story changed. FBI agent John Connolly later put another report in Bulger's file, suggesting that Nicholas had, in fact, been one of the triggermen in the Blackfriars killings. As most of you know, this iceberg is several years old, and since its creation, some of these entries have been solved. This next topic is one such case, but we will go over it nonetheless. Britanee Marie Drexel was born on October 7th, 1991 in Rochester, New York. She was a 17-year-old high school student at the time of her disappearance. In April 2009, as spring break approached, Britanee asked her mother, Dawn, for permission to go on a trip to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina with friends. Dawn, concerned about the lack of parental supervision and not knowing Britanee's potential travel companions, denied the request. This decision was also influenced by the teen's recent academic struggles, which Dawn attributed to the stress of her parents' ongoing divorce. Despite her mother's refusal, Britanee was determined to go on the trip. On April 22nd, she devised a plan to circumvent her parents' decision. Britanee told her mother she would be spending a few days at a friend's house nearby. In reality, she and two friends embarked on an 800-mile drive to Myrtle Beach without permission or knowledge. The group arrived safely on the morning of April 23rd. For the next 2 days, Britanee enjoyed her spring break, unbeknownst to her family back in New York. Her boyfriend, John Greco, who had stayed behind in Rochester for work, was aware of Britanee's true whereabouts and kept in regular contact with her via text messages. As the trip progressed, it became apparent that Britanee's break wasn't going as planned. On April 25th, she exchanged messages with John, expressing her disappointment and feelings of isolation. According to her sister, Marissa Drexel, Britanee had gotten into a disagreement with the slightly older girls she had traveled with. In her text to John, Britanee mentioned feeling alone and expressed a desire to return home. That same day, Britanee's movements were later pieced together through witness accounts, surveillance footage, and cell phone records. She was staying at the Bar Harbor Hotel, located on the Ocean Boulevard in Myrtle Beach. Around 8 p.m., she left her friends at the Bar Harbor and began walking south along Ocean Boulevard. Her destination was the Blue Water Resort, approximately 1.5 miles away, where she planned to meet Peter Brazowitz, a 20-year-old nightclub promoter and classmate from Rochester whom she had unexpectedly encountered in Myrtle Beach. This chance meeting with a familiar face seemed to offer Britanee some comfort amidst her feelings of being alone. Security cameras at the Blue Water Resort captured Britanee's arrival at 8:33 p.m. Britanee's visit to the Blue Water Resort was brief. At approximately 8:45 p.m., just 15 minutes after her arrival, surveillance cameras recorded her leaving the hotel alone. Horry County prosecutor Jimmy Richardson later described the footage, noting, "You can tell that she's walking at a fairly quick pace with nobody behind her. She's comfortable, but she's determined to get to wherever she is going. As she left, she continued to text with her boyfriend John." Their exchange carried on until 8:58 p.m., which would tragically mark Britanee's final known communication. In those last messages, she gave no indication of distress or any hint of the danger that lay ahead. The sudden cut-off of texts alarmed John. Concerned for her safety, he began calling her friends that went on the trip, desperately trying to locate her. When these efforts proved fruitless, he made the difficult decision to contact Britanee's mother. It was at this moment that Dawn learned that her daughter was not with a friend locally as she had believed, but hundreds of miles away. Dawn immediately contacted Britanee's adoptive father, Chad, and then reached out to the Rochester police, hoping they could establish communication with their counterparts in South Carolina. As the gravity of the situation set in, repeated calls and texts to Britanee's phone went unanswered. The investigation began on the morning of April 26th. One of the first steps taken by investigators was to review security camera footage from the area where Britanee was last seen. This led to the discovery of crucial video evidence from the Blue Water Resort. The footage showed the girl arriving at the resort at 8:33 on April 25th and leaving alone just 15 minutes later. This video became a key piece of evidence as it provided the last confirmed sighting of Drexel. Investigators then focused on interviewing Britanee's friends and acquaintances who were with her. They quickly identified Peter Brozowitz as the last known person to have seen Britanee before she disappeared. The two had apparently met at a local nightclub the night before her disappearance. Police interviewed Brozowitz and the men with whom he was sharing hotel rooms. However, after thorough questioning, police stated that no one has been ruled in or out, and they did not have any specific persons of interest at that time. The investigation also led to the clearing of the two female travel companions with whom Britanee had traveled with. A search of her hotel room yielded important information. Investigators found all of the clothes she had packed for the trip, but notably absent were her purse and cell phone. These missing items became key focuses in the search for clues about her disappearance. As the investigation progressed, authorities turned to cell phone records for additional leads. Britanee's phone records revealed a concerning trajectory. Her phone's network pings were tracked on a path leading 50 to 60 miles south of Myrtle Beach, in an area along US Route 17 near the Georgetown-Charleston County line. Most alarmingly, the pings abruptly ceased in the early morning hours of April 26th, the day after she was last seen. This cell phone data shifted the focus of the search to the rural, swampy areas where her phone had last registered activity. For 11 days, authorities combed through areas near the county line and around the beach where a body might have been disposed of. Despite the intensive search efforts, no physical evidence of Britanee or her belongings was found. For years, the case remained unsolved, with various theories and leads pursued. Dawn relocated to Myrtle Beach to be closer to the investigation and to continue searching for her daughter. She believed that Britanee might have been lured to Myrtle Beach with promises of a modeling job and suspected that her daughter may have been trafficked. In 2016, the FBI announced that they believed the girl had been murdered shortly after her disappearance. They stated that she had likely been abducted and taken to the Georgetown area before being killed. The Bureau offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the resolution of the case. In August of that same year, the case took a dramatic turn during a bond hearing for Timothy Deshawn Taylor, who was serving time in state prison on an unrelated charge. FBI agent Garrick Munoz provided testimony that would thrust Taylor into the center of the Drexel investigation. Garrick testified that earlier that year, an inmate named Taquan Brown, who was serving a 25-year sentence for manslaughter, had come forward with information about Britanee's fate. According to Brown's account, he had visited a stash house in McClellanville shortly after the disappearance in 2009. Brown claimed that as he walked through the house, he witnessed Taylor assaulting Britanee with others present. The story continued with Brown alleging that he proceeded to the backyard to make a payment to Taylor's father. During this interaction, Brown claimed to have seen Britanee attempt to escape from the house, only to be recaptured. Brown stated that he witnessed Taylor pistol whip the girl before taking her back inside. Shortly after, Brown reported hearing 2 gunshots, which he assumed signaled Britanee's death. He further claimed to have seen a wrapped body being removed from the house and disposed of in one of the many alligator ponds in the area. Garrick testified that Brown's statement was partially corroborated by information from another unnamed informant who had been incarcerated in the Georgetown County Jail. This second informant allegedly told authorities that Taylor had picked up Britanee and he attempted to show her off to friends and sell her for trafficking purposes. According to this account, when media attention on Britanee's case intensified, Taylor allegedly decided to kill her to avoid arrest. These allegations against Taylor and his father were shocking and garnered significant media attention. However, there were several problematic aspects to these claims that would later come to light. Firstly, Timothy Taylor was only 16 years old at the time of Britanee's disappearance. Moreover, he had lost one of his arms in a childhood accident, which his family argued would have made it physically impossible for him to commit the acts he was accused of. Taylor's lawyer pointed out the vast disparity between Taylor's previous offenses and the horrific crimes he was now being accused of, stating, "Being a getaway driver and a McDonald's robbery is a universe away from kidnapping, murdering, and feeding an innocent teenage girl to alligators." Despite the lack of physical evidence and the questionable nature of the informant's testimony, the FBI pursued Taylor aggressively. The Bureau's focus on him and his family had severe consequences for them. Joan Taylor, Timothy's mother, described the impact. "For over a decade, my son and his father were relentlessly pursued for a crime that federal law enforcement officials knew neither of them committed because they had evidence to the contrary. Their illegitimate investigation wreaked havoc on our lives." However, the allegations began to unravel in 2022 when a major breakthrough occurred. The key figure in this revelation was Raymond Moody, a 62-year-old registered offender who had been on law enforcement's radar since the early stages of the investigation. Moody had a troubling history, having previously served 21 years of a 40-year prison sentence for kidnapping and an 8-year-old child in California. He had also been charged with similar crimes in 7 other cases back in the 1980s. On May 4th, 2022, Moody turned himself in to the Georgetown County Sheriff's Office on an obstruction of justice charge. This initial charge was a strategic move by law enforcement to hold Moody while they built their case. Interestingly, court officials in Georgetown County initially had no paperwork on Moody, and there was confusion about why he was being held without bond for a week, given that obstruction of justice is typically a bailable offense. During the investigation, it was discovered that Britanee's cell phone had been moving at walking speed before suddenly accelerating to 55 miles per hour, indicating she had entered a vehicle. By correlating this data with surveillance footage, investigators identified a vehicle passing Britanee's location at the precise time her phone indicated she had entered a car. This vehicle was eventually linked to Raymond Moody. One significant development involved Angel Vouse, Moody's girlfriend. Investigators convinced her to wear a wire, allowing them to gather potentially incriminating information from Moody. While a subsequent search of his residence didn't yield physical evidence, it did lead to a face-to-face conversation between Moody and FBI investigators. During this conversation, investigators informed Moody that both he and his girlfriend were subjects of the investigation. This revelation likely put pressure on Moody as he agreed to sit down for an interview. It was in this interview on May 5th, 2022, that Moody finally confessed to the murder of Britanee Drexel. He admitted that he and Angel had picked up the girl on Ocean Boulevard, inviting her to party with them. According to Moody, Britanee willingly got into their car after noticing that they were smoking marijuana. The group drove to Pole Yard Boat Landing in Georgetown County, where they continued to smoke. Moody claimed that at this point Angel left the scene. It was then that Moody sexually assaulted and murdered Britanee. He confessed to strangling her after things, quote, got out of hand, and he panicked. He admitted to initially hiding her body near the boat landing before later burying it in a different location. He claimed to have disposed of her clothing and purse in a Salvation Army donation box in Georgetown, thrown her phone into a river, and burned or cut up her identification documents. Following his confession, Moody led law enforcement to the location where he had buried Britanee's remains. On May 11th, 2022, human remains were discovered in a wooded area off a gated private drive outside Georgetown, South Carolina. The remains were buried about 4 feet underground and were confirmed to belong to Britanee Drexel. On October 19th, 2022, Raymond Moody pleaded guilty to murder, kidnapping, and first-degree criminal conduct. Following his plea, Moody was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 2 consecutive terms of 30 years for the kidnapping and criminal conduct charges. In court, he expressed remorse, stating, "I was a monster then, and I was a monster when I took Britanee Drexel's life. I don't have the words to express how horrible I feel. I'm very sorry." The cosmic microwave background radiation, or CMB, is a remnant of the early universe. It has been a cornerstone of modern cosmology since its discovery in the 1960s. However, within this light lies an anomaly known as the CMB cold spot, which has puzzled astronomers for decades. The spot is an unusually large and cold region in the cosmic microwave background radiation. It is found in the southern celestial hemisphere in the direction of the constellation Eridanus. The cold spot spans approximately 10 degrees on the sky, making it anomalously large compared to typical CMB fluctuations. The probability of finding such a large, cold region by chance in Gaussian simulations was estimated to be only less than 2% and possibly much lower. The cold spot was first detected in the early 2000s by NASA's Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy probe. Its existence was later confirmed by the European Space Agency's Planck satellite, ruling out the possibility of it being a systematic error or instrumental artifact. The detection of the spot raised questions about its origin and compatibility with the standard cosmological model. Several theories have been proposed to explain the cold spot. The most popular explanation suggests that a giant cosmic void called a supervoid might be responsible for it. This supervoid could cause CMB photons passing through it to lose energy via the integrated Sachs-Wolf effect, making that region appear colder. In 2015, a study showed the presence of a supervoid with a diameter of about 1.8 billion light-years, centered at 3 billion light-years from our galaxy in the direction of the cold spot. This would make it one of the largest known structures in the universe. However, the debate continues on whether this void is sufficient to explain the cold spot fully. Some researchers suggest the spot could be an extreme manifestation of primordial density fluctuations from the early universe, although this is considered statistically unlikely given the standard cosmological model. Recent studies propose that the cold spot signal could be attributed to the foregrounds of galaxies in and around a supergroup in that region. This explanation focuses on the local universe rather than distant cosmic structures. The Gatton murders, also known as the Gatton tragedy or the Murphy murders, stand as one of Australia's most notorious unsolved crimes. This triple homicide occurred on December 26, 1898, near the small town of Gatton in Queensland, Australia. The brutality of the crime, the botched investigation, and its unsolved status have captured the public imagination for well over 100 years. The victims were three siblings from the Murphy family: Michael Murphy, aged 29, Nora Murphy, aged 27, and Ellen Murphy, aged 18. The family lived on a farm near Blackfellows Creek, approximately 8 miles from the town of Gatton. One evening, the three siblings set out from their farm to attend a dance in Gatton. They were traveling in a horse-drawn sulky cart, which Michael had borrowed from their brother-in-law, William Menneil. The cart had a distinctive wobble in one of its wheels, a detail that would later be important for the investigation. Upon arriving in Gatton, the Murphy siblings discovered that the dance they had planned to attend had been cancelled. Witnesses reported seeing their cart turn around and head back toward their farm. This was the last time the siblings were seen alive. When the siblings failed to return home that night, their mother, Mary, became concerned. Early the following morning, on December 27th, she asked her son-in-law, William Menneil, to search for them in Gatton. William set out on horseback, following the Tent Hill Road. As he progressed, he noticed the distinctive tracks of his cart, recognizable due to the wobbling wheel turning off the main road through a slip rail. Intrigued and increasingly worried, he followed these tracks along a rough, winding trail that cut through dense wattle scrub. After traveling approximately 3/4 of a mile, he came upon a disturbing scene. In a field known as Moran's Paddock, about a mile from Gatton, William discovered the bodies of his three in-laws. Michael and Ellen were found lying back to back, their bodies a mere 2 feet apart. Nora's body was discovered 28 feet to the east, lying on a neatly spread rug. All three bodies were oriented in an east-west direction, with their feet pointing westward. Investigators would later describe this detail as the killer's signature. Additionally, the positioning of the bodies formed a triangle with the cart, which was facing south, 17 feet from Michael's body and 36 feet from Nora's. William's horse, still harnessed to the cart, had been shot in the head and lay dead between the shafts. Upon closer inspection, it was discovered that all 3 victims had been brutally bludgeoned. Both Nora and Ellen had their hands tied behind their backs with their own handkerchiefs, while Michael's hands were not bound. But abrasions on his wrists suggested he may have been restrained at some point during the killings. The women's clothing was in disarray, suggesting that they had been assaulted. Nora's skirt was pulled up around her waist and her shirt had been torn open, exposing her breasts. Her face bore numerous scratches and a long laceration along her right eye. In a state of shock, William raced back to Gatton on horseback. His first stop was at the Brian Boru Hotel, where he informed the guests of the discovery. This impulsive action would later be criticized as it led to a rush of curious onlookers to the crime scene, potentially contaminating valuable evidence. After alerting the hotel residents, William made his way to the local police station, where he informed Acting Sergeant William Arell of the murders. The two went back to the crime scene, where they spent about 30 minutes before Arell returned to Gatton to send a telegram to the Brisbane Commissioner of Police. It wasn't until 2 days after the discovery of the bodies that investigating officers from Brisbane arrived at the scene, by which time crucial evidence may have been lost or contaminated. The communication breakdown between local and Brisbane authorities further complicated the initial stages of the investigation. Michael Murphy's brother Daniel, an officer at Brisbane Police Headquarters, had received a telegram from a family friend on December 27th informing him of the murders. Daniel applied for 3 days leave, had it granted, but failed to catch the 1 p.m. train to Gatton. Upon returning to headquarters, he discovered that no action was being taken by detectives in the Criminal Investigation Branch, including Inspector Frederick Urquhart, due to rumors circulating that the murders were a hoax. It wasn't until 4 p.m. on December 28th that the inspector was informed that the murders were not a hoax. Even then, he did not inform the Commissioner of Police for 5 hours because the information did not come through official channels. When the Commissioner finally ordered him to immediately take 2 detectives to Gatton, the team did not depart until 7:30 a.m. the following morning, despite there being a train leaving at midnight. This sequence of events was later described as incomprehensible by a royal commission, indicative of the existence of a rotten system. The delay in the arrival of the Brisbane investigators meant that the bodies of the Murphy siblings remained at the crime scene for an extended period. As the sun blazed overhead and began to affect the bodies, local authorities finally decided to move them to the hotel in Gatton to await the medical examiner. This decision, while necessary given the circumstances, further compromised the crime scene and evidence. The initial medical examination of the bodies, conducted by Dr. von Lossberg, was later criticized for its lack of thoroughness. This examination failed to detect that Michael Murphy had been shot in the head, a crucial detail that would only be discovered months later during a second autopsy. Upon his arrival, Inspector Urquhart took charge of the investigation. After reviewing the scant evidence and discussing the lackluster post-mortem examinations, he made the decision to exhume the bodies for a more thorough examination. Dr. Ray, the chief government medical officer, was brought in to perform comprehensive autopsies on the 3 victims. This second set of autopsies revealed details that had been missed during the initial examination. Ray discovered that Michael had indeed been shot in the head with a bullet that matched the one found in the horse. He also determined that the perpetrator was likely left-handed or ambidextrous. Despite these new findings, the inspector's assessment of the case remained grim. In a telegram to his superiors in Brisbane, he stated, "Circumstances point to premeditation, details most atrocious. There is so far nothing to lay hold of." The investigation was further complicated by the discovery of another murder victim, 15-year-old Alfred Hill, 40 miles away from Gatton. Hill's body was found on January 7, 1899, with similarities to the Murphy murders. He had been shot in the head with the same caliber gun. His pony had been shot between the eyes, and his feet were arranged pointing west. Despite an investigation involving more than 1,000 interviews, no one was ever charged with the crime. The lack of definitive evidence, coupled with the botched handling of the case, has left room for speculation about who committed the brutal triple homicide and why. One of the primary suspects in the murders was a man named Richard Burgess, a recently released convict with a violent past. Richard had been discharged from prison on November 30th, 1898, after serving a 6-month sentence for an elderly woman near Toowoomba, approximately 20 miles from Gatton. His criminal history and transient lifestyle made him a natural target for suspicion. He was arrested on January 6, 1899 in the Bunya Mountains for unrelated, quote, peculiar behavior. Police linked him to the murders based on his proximity to Gatton around the time of the crime and his reputation as a dangerous individual. Witnesses claimed to have seen someone resembling Richard near the area where Alfred Hill was killed. Despite these circumstantial connections, he had an alibi for Boxing Day 1898 when the siblings were killed. Witnesses placed him far from Gatton at the time of the murders. Unable to find concrete evidence linking him to the crime, police eventually released him in March 1899. Richard left Australia soon after his release. While some investigators believed he could have been involved in both the Gatton and Alfred Hill murders, his alibi ultimately cleared him of suspicion. Thomas Day was another prominent suspect in the case. As a butcher, Day worked for A.G. Clark in Gatton and lived in a hut approximately 270 meters from Moran's paddock, where the Murphy siblings' bodies were discovered. His proximity to the crime scene and suspicious behavior drew significant attention from investigators. Day had been seen walking along Tent Hill Road, the same road where the siblings vanished on several occasions before Boxing Day. After the murders, witnesses reported that Day was seen washing blood off a pullover. When questioned by police, he claimed that the blood came from his work as a butcher. However, his employer warned him not to wash a particular jumper after the murders. Ignoring this advice, Day boiled and scrubbed the jumper twice in what appeared to be an effort to remove evidence. In addition to these suspicious actions, police later discovered that a revolver matching the caliber used in both the Gatton and Alfred Hill murders had been found near Clark's butchery after Day left town. This revolver had 4 spent chambers, the exact number of shots fired across both murder scenes. Despite these connections, there was insufficient evidence to charge Day with any crime. He enlisted in the Australian Army shortly after being questioned, but deserted in May 1899. His actions and proximity to both crime scenes have led many to speculate about his involvement in these heinous acts. One of the most controversial theories surrounding the murders involves members of the Murphy family themselves. This theory gained traction after rumors began circulating about possible incest or other family disputes that might have motivated such violence. A particularly damning rumor suggested that Daniel Murphy Sr., father of Michael, Nora, and Ellen, may have killed his children after discovering an inappropriate relationship between them, or even because he himself was involved in such behavior with his daughters. These allegations were fueled by reports that a woman staying near Moran's paddock on the night of December 26th heard a female voice cry out, "Father," shortly before screams were heard. The Murphy family's response to these accusations only added fuel to this theory. They reportedly became uncooperative with investigators after these rumors surfaced and refused to assist police efforts by providing horses for search parties or other resources. The only exception was Daniel Murphy Jr., who was himself a police officer and bound by duty to assist in some capacity. While this theory has persisted in popular imagination due to its sensational nature, it was never seriously entertained by investigators at the time due to lack of evidence. The Millennium Prize problems, a set of 7 challenging mathematical problems, were announced by the Clay Mathematics Institute in 2000 to celebrate mathematics in the new millennium and highlight some of the most difficult unsolved issues in mathematics at the time. Each problem carries a prize of $1 million USD for its solution, making them not only intellectually significant, but also financially rewarding. These problems were inspired by the famous list of 23 unsolved math problems presented by David Hilbert in 1900 at the International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris. Hilbert's problems had a profound impact on mathematics throughout the 20th century, driving research and shaping entire fields of study. As the new millennium approached, the Clay Mathematics Institute sought to create a similar list of problems that would guide mathematical research in the 21st century. The selection process for the Millennium Problems began in November 1998 during the inaugural meeting of the Clay Mathematics Institute. Initially, the idea was to create a list of 50 unsolved problems with small monetary rewards. However, as the selection process progressed, the number of problems was reduced and the prize amount was increased to $1 million per problem. The final list of 7 Millennium Prize problems consists of the Poincare conjecture, P versus NP problem, Hodge conjecture, Riemann hypothesis, Yang-Mills existence and mass gap, Navier-Stokes existence and smoothness, and the Birch and Swinnerton-Dyer conjecture. In 2002 and 2003, Russian mathematician Grigory Perelman published 3 papers that provided proof of the Poincare conjecture. His work built upon the Ricci flow method developed by Richard Hamilton. Perelman's proof was verified by the mathematical community over the next few years and was universally accepted as valid by 2006. This solution is notable not only for its mathematical significance, but also for the circumstances surrounding its publication and the aftermath. Perelman published his work as preprints rather than in peer-reviewed journals, which was unconventional. His papers were known for their brevity and for skipping over details that would typically require extensive explanation. As we move forward, this remains the only problem that has been solved. Jeanne van Calck was born on September 17, 1897 in Brussels, Belgium. Her mother, Françoise, was unmarried, which presented significant social challenges during that era. Jeanne's father, a typographer for the Le Soir newspaper, had abandoned the family and never knew his daughter. At the time of her death, Jeanne was 8 years old and lived primarily with her grandparents at 2 Rue Opham in Brussels. Her grandfather worked for a Brussels tramway company during the day and as a controller at the Royal Flemish Theatre in the evenings. Despite not living with her mother, the child would visit her regularly in the evenings, usually accompanied by her grandfather. Her mother resided at the corner of Boulevard Baudouin and the Causeway of Antwerp. On the evening of February 7th, 1906, a tragic series of events unfolded that would forever change the life of young Jeanne and shock the entire nation. The day had begun like any other for the 8-year-old girl. Jeanne's daily routine included visiting her mother for a few hours each evening, a journey she typically made accompanied by her grandfather. However, this particular Wednesday was different. Her grandfather was running late due to his work commitments. As the clock approached 6:30 p.m., Jeanne grew restless, eager to see her mother as she did every evening. "You are late and Mom could worry. I will go alone," the girl reportedly told her grandfather, displaying a level of independence that was endearing initially. Her grandfather, weighing the short distance to Jeanne's mother's home against his work obligations, made the fateful decision to allow the child to make the journey alone for the first time. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. As Jeanne prepared to leave, her grandmother helped her dress for the chilly February evening. The young girl donned a plaid dress over which she wore a white apron. To protect against the winter cold, she put on a blue wool hat and a pair of sturdy leather ankle boots. These details of her clothing would later become crucial in the investigation that followed. At approximately 6:30 p.m., Jeanne stepped out of her grandparents' home and into the bustling streets of early 20th century Brussels. The city was in the midst of its evening rush, with workers returning home and shops preparing to close for the night. The street lamps were just beginning to flicker to life, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. The girl set off on her all-too-familiar route. The distance to her mother's house was short, and Jeanne knew the way well. She was last seen in the area where Brockray Tower stands today in De Broekerplein, a central square in Brussels that would have been busy with trams, carriages, and pedestrians at that hour. What exactly transpired after the girl was spotted in the square remains a mystery that has puzzled investigators for over a century. However, a crucial piece of information came to light during the investigation, though it was initially overlooked due to the source being a child. A 7-year-old friend of Jeanne's later reported to investigators that she had seen her near her grandparents' house at approximately 7 p.m. on the night she disappeared. This sighting, occurring about 30 minutes after she had left her home, placed the young girl in a location she should have already passed if she had been following her usual path to her mother's house. Even more alarming, the young witness stated that the girl was not alone. She was accompanied by a man whom Jeanne seemed to be comfortable with. The girl observed the two walking in the opposite direction from her mother's house. This critical information, had it been properly followed up on at the time, might have altered the course of the investigation dramatically. As the evening wore on, Françoise van Calck began to grow worried. It was unusual for her daughter to be late, and as the hours passed with no sign of her, Françoise's concern turned to panic. She reached out to the grandparents only to learn that her daughter had left their home hours earlier. A frantic search ensued, with family members and neighbors combing the streets and checking with local businesses to see if anyone had spotted the young girl. As news of the disappearance spread, the community rallied together, forming search parties and distributing descriptions of the missing child. The police were alerted, but in the early hours of the investigation, there was still hope that the child had simply gotten lost or been delayed. No one could have imagined the horrifying truth that would be revealed. On the night of February 7th, 1906, a discovery was made. At approximately 11:45 p.m., Joseph Eilenbosch, a machinist employed at the Alhambra Theater, and his son were making their way home when they stumbled upon a suspicious package on the doorstep of 22 Rue des Hirondelles. The theater, a once prominent landmark in Brussels that was demolished in 1973, stood not far from where this find was made. The package that caught Joseph's attention was peculiar. It was wrapped in thick paper and bound with hemp cord, formed into a makeshift carrying handle. Given the late hour and the unusual nature of the parcel, his suspicions were immediately aroused. At the time, there were standing rewards for citizens who reported suspicious packages found in public places to the police, a measure likely implemented due to concerns about criminal activities or potential threats to public safety. Acting on his instincts, Joseph promptly alerted the local authorities. Police officer Gustav van Dam was the first to respond to the call. Upon arrival, the officer approached the package with caution. As he tentatively reached out to examine it, he felt something that sent a chill down his spine. Beneath the paper wrapping, he could discern what felt like hair and skin. Recognizing the potential gravity of the situation, Van Dam called for backup. His colleague Pierre Noël soon arrived at the scene. Together, the two officers carefully lifted the package and transported it to the nearby police station. At the station, the package was brought to the attention of Department Chief Desmet. Under his supervision, Officer Noël was instructed to open the parcel. As the layers of thick paper were peeled back, the officers were confronted with a terrifying sight. The first items revealed were a blue pea coat and a checkered dress, seemingly ordinary children's clothing. However, as they continued to unwrap the package, they discovered traces of blood. To their horror, the package contained the dismembered remains of a young girl. The body was still warm, indicating that the crime had been committed recently. Most disturbingly, the victim's legs were missing from the package. The meticulous way in which the body had been dismembered suggested to investigators that the perpetrator possessed the skills of a doctor or butcher. In a twist of fate that only made the situation more tragic, two distraught individuals arrived at the station to report the disappearance of an 8-year-old girl named Jeanne van Calck. When asked to describe what she had been wearing, their description matched the clothing found with the dismembered body. As dawn broke on February 8th, the news of the murder spread rapidly through Brussels. A large crowd gathered in front of the site where the package containing the remains had been found. Among the onlookers was Françoise, who fainted upon hearing the devastating news of her daughter's fate. The investigation into the murder began immediately after the discovery of the remains. The initial examination of the crime scene where the parcel was left yielded crucial evidence. The package containing the body was carefully analyzed. Investigators noted that the remains were wrapped in pages from the Le Soir newspaper dated January 12 and 27, 1906, as well as pages from the Journal de Paris. This detail would later prove significant in establishing a timeline and potentially linking the crime to individuals with access to these specific newspaper editions. The coroner's examination of the body revealed disturbing details about Jeanne's final moments. It was determined that the young girl had died from asphyxiation caused by violent vomiting after being forced to consume a large quantity of alcohol. The time of death was estimated to be between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. on February 7th. A massive search operation was launched, with police scouring the streets and canals of Brussels. On February 15th, a breakthrough came when searchers discovered Jeanne's boots. The following day, a gardener made a grisly discovery in the park of Stuyvenberg, a former royal farm, finding two packages containing the missing legs. The Belgian government, recognizing the gravity of the crime and the public's demand for justice, offered a substantial reward of 20,000 Belgian francs for information leading to the killer's identification. Despite the reward and the intense public interest, the investigation faced numerous setbacks. Multiple suspects were detained and questioned, but no conclusive evidence was found to link any of them definitively to the crime. The lack of modern forensic techniques made it challenging to connect potential suspects to the physical evidence found at the crime scene. On December 1st, 1907, less than 2 years after the tragic murder of Van Calck, Brussels played host to another crime that bore striking similarities to the earlier case. This time, the victim was 6-year-old Annette Belot. Annette was the daughter of a bronze worker living in a working-class neighborhood of Brussels. On that Sunday evening around 7 p.m., Annette and her older brother were playing on Dam Street. This area was a busy part of the city. As the children played, they were approached by a man estimated to be between 35 and 40 years old. The stranger engaged the children in conversation, focusing his attention on Annette's brother. In a move that would prove catastrophic, the man asked the boy to run an errand for him, to go and buy cigarettes. To sweeten the deal, he promised to reward the child with candy upon his return. The man's request seemed innocent enough at first glance to the kids. He assured the boy that he would watch over Annette while he was gone, even saying, "Leave your little sister with me, you will go faster." Tragically, the boy accepted this offer, leaving his younger sister in the care of the stranger. When the brother returned from his errand, both his sister and the man had vanished without a trace. The boy's world collapsed as he realized what had occurred. Weeping and distraught, he rushed to his parents to report what had happened. In tears, he told them, "Mother, Annette has disappeared. A man has taken her away quickly and suddenly." The disappearance set off a frantic search through the city. The police were alerted and the community mobilized to find the missing girl. However, their worst fears were realized the very next day when Annette's body was discovered in a meadow behind the veterinary school near the Gare du Midi. The forensic examination revealed that she had been raped and strangled. The location where her body was found, in a relatively secluded area not far from where she had been abducted, suggested that the killer had local knowledge. As news of Annette's murder spread, the people of Brussels couldn't help but draw parallels to Van Calck's case. Both victims were of similar age and had a relatively similar appearance and profile. They were abducted in the same general area of Brussels at around 7 p.m., and both crimes were committed during the winter season. Furthermore, both girls were assaulted before their deaths, indicating a shared motive and MO. Also, both cases seem to have occurred in relative short time frames, suggesting that the culprit acted decisively. The investigation into Annette's murder also failed to identify the killer. Despite the efforts of law enforcement and the community, the perpetrator managed to evade justice. The Tekaxitl-Calixtla-Huaca head is an archaeological artifact that has sparked debate about potential pre-Columbian contact between the Old and New Worlds. This small terracotta figurine, which appears to be of Roman origin, was reportedly discovered in 1933 during excavations at a pre-Hispanic site in central Mexico. The find has generated significant interest and skepticism among archaeologists and historians due to its seemingly out-of-place nature. The item was unearthed by archaeologist Jose Payne. It was found as part of a burial offering beneath 3 intact floors of a pyramidal structure. The burial context also contained various other artifacts, including objects made of gold, copper, turquoise, rock crystal, jet, bone, shell, and pottery. The burial itself has been dated to between 1476 and 1510 AD, which places it right around the time of European contact with the Americas. This temporal context has been a source of both intrigue and skepticism regarding the artifact's authenticity and significance. The head is likely originally part of a larger figurine. Its appearance is strikingly different from other pre-Columbian artifacts found at the site or from the same era. Instead, it bears a strong resemblance to Roman artwork. Several experts have weighed in on the artifact's identification. Ernst Boehringer, a classical archaeologist, argued that the head is a Roman work. Bernard Andrea, a director emeritus of the German Institute of Archaeology in Rome, confirmed the identification as Roman, stating that it is without doubt a Roman work from around the 2nd century AD with hairstyle and beard shape typical of the Severian emperor's period. The realism and individual character portrayed in the figurine set it apart from early Christian portraits types and align it more closely with Roman male busts from the suggested period. The head, if authentic and correctly identified, could have significant implications for our understanding of pre-Columbian transoceanic contacts. However, it's important to note that even if the artifact is genuine, it does not necessarily imply sustained contact or influence between the Old and New Worlds. Recent archaeological discoveries have shown that Roman and Phoenician seafarers reached the Canary Islands as early as the 4th century BC. This expands the known range of ancient Mediterranean maritime activities and makes the possibility of accidental transatlantic voyages somewhat more plausible. However, it's crucial to emphasize that the fundamental aspects of Old and New World civilizations remained distinctly different until the early 16th century. This includes differences in domestic plants and animals, knowledge and use of metals, writing systems, languages, and religious beliefs. Any pre-Columbian contacts, if they occurred, appear to have had limited cultural and biological impact. The case of the artifact remains unresolved and continues to be a subject of debate. While some see it as potential evidence of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact, others remain skeptical, pointing out the possibilities of post-Columbian introduction or even a hoax. Stephen Koecher's life leading up to his disappearance was marked by a series of financial challenges and career setbacks, largely influenced by the economic turmoil of the Great Recession. Born into a large, close-knit family, he was raised with strong Mormon influences. His upbringing instilled in him a sense of independence and a desire to make his own way in the world, traits that would later play a significant role in his approach to his financial difficulties. After graduating from high school in 1998, Stephen pursued higher education, earning a bachelor's degree in communications from the University of Utah in 2002. This set the stage for what he hoped would be a promising career in journalism and advertising. Following his graduation, Stephen's commitment to his faith led him to embark on a missionary trip to Brazil, where he learned to speak Portuguese fluently. Upon returning from Brazil, he began his professional journey in the field of communications. His first significant role was with a small newspaper in Bountiful, Utah, where he gained a valuable experience in the publishing industry. This position allowed him to apply his academic knowledge in a practical setting and build a foundation for his career in media. In 2007, Stephen's career took a step forward when he secured a position with the digital advertising division of the Salt Lake Tribune. This move represented a shift towards the growing field of online media, aligning with the industry's trend towards digital platforms. However, the job came with its own set of challenges. Stephen was assigned to work the overnight shift, a schedule that proved to be physically and mentally taxing. The late hours disrupted his sleep patterns and made it difficult for him to maintain a normal social life or participate in church activities, both of which were important aspects of his life. Despite his efforts to adapt to the demanding schedule, Stephen found it increasingly difficult to cope with the night shift. The strain of working through the night and sleeping during the day began to take its toll, affecting both his well-being and his ability to engage in the community activities that were so important to him. After several months of struggling with the schedule, Stephen made the difficult decision to leave his position at the Salt Lake Tribune in July 2007, prioritizing his health and social connections over job security. Following his departure, Stephen faced a period of unemployment. However, his perseverance paid off when he was hired by Matchbin.com, an online advertising firm, 3 months later. This new role seemed to offer a fresh start and the potential for career growth in the digital advertising sector. It also allowed Stephen to return to a more conventional work schedule, rekindling hope for a balanced life that included both professional success and personal fulfillment. In 2009, Stephen made the decision to relocate to St. George, a city with a milder climate. He quickly settled down, finding a room in a house with one other tenant named Jordan. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, within a month of his relocation, Stephen was informed that his role at Matchbin.com was being terminated. This sudden job loss, coming so soon after his move, was a devastating blow to his plans and his morale. The timing of Stephen's job loss could not have been worse. The Great Recession of 2008 had sent waves through the global economy, and its effects were still being acutely felt in 2009. The job market was exceptionally tight, with unemployment rates soaring and companies across various sectors implementing hiring freezes or downsizing. For someone in Stephen's position, finding new employment in this economic climate proved to be an enormous challenge. As the weeks turned into months, his financial situation grew increasingly precarious. He sent out his credentials and job applications daily, but securing even an interview proved difficult in the competitive job market. To make ends meet, Stephen took on part-time work distributing flyers for a local window washing firm. However, this stopgap employment was far from sufficient to cover his living expenses, let alone provide the kind of financial stability he needed to thrive in his new environment. By November 2009, the full weight of Stephen's financial struggles had become apparent. He had fallen 3 months behind on his rent payments, accumulating a debt of $1,500 to his landlord, Brett Bishop. The situation was further complicated by unpaid utility bills, with the power company threatening to cut off his electricity due to non-payment. These mounting debts created a constant source of stress and anxiety for Stephen, who prided himself on his independence and was reluctant to seek help from others. His parents, aware of his struggles, offered financial assistance to help him through this challenging period. However, Steven's strong desire for independence and his determination to solve his problems on his own led him to resist these offers of help. On December 10th, 2009, Stephen embarked on a perplexing road trip that would cover over 1,100 miles in just 24 hours. This journey began in St. George, and at approximately 6 a.m., he left his home and headed north towards Salt Lake City. Here, Stephen made a purchase of $13 for gas at a Maverick station. Following his stop in Salt Lake City, Stephen continued his journey westward. Roughly 3 hours later, he arrived in West Wendover, Nevada. At this location, he made another purchase, this time for $33 at a Pilot Travel Center. The distance covered between Salt Lake City and West Wendover is about 127 miles, bringing his total journey at this point to approximately 429 miles. From West Wendover, Stephen's trail becomes less clear for a period. However, at some point during this day, he made an unexpected and significant detour. He traveled to Ruby Valley, Nevada to visit the parents of a former girlfriend. This unannounced visit adds an intriguing layer to the mystery of his travels. During his visit, Stephen had lunch with his ex-girlfriend's parents. In conversation with them, he mentioned that he was on his way to visit family in Sacramento, California. This statement, however, was later discovered to be untrue, as Stephen had no family in Sacramento. The purpose of this fabrication remains unknown and adds to the enigmatic nature of his journey. After leaving Ruby Valley, the next confirmed location was at a Flying J truck stop in Springville, Utah. At 6:56 p.m., while presumably still on the road, Stephen received a call from his mother, Jeanne. During this conversation, they discussed plans for Christmas, with Stephen mentioning that he hoped to be home by the 23rd. He explained that he wanted to get in some more work hours before the holiday. This call provides insight into Stephen's state of mind and future plans, seemingly normal and forward-looking. Notably, during this call, Stephen did not mention anything about his extensive travels or his alleged plans to visit Sacramento. His mother, concerned about his financial situation, deposited money into his bank account after the call to help with his bills. Approximately 30 minutes after speaking with his mother, at 7:24 p.m., Stephen made a purchase of a few dollars at a Taco Time restaurant in Nephi, Utah. This stop for a quick dinner adds another data point to his journey. However, it's worth noting that based on the previous known location at the Flying J in Springville, Stephen should have arrived at Taco Time closer to 6:14 p.m., according to GPS mapping. This discrepancy of about 70 minutes remains unaccounted for and adds another layer of mystery to his movements. The final recorded stop of this day of travel was Stephen's return to his home in St. George at 11:13 p.m. This marked the end of a journey that covered approximately 1,091 miles in a single day, based on confirmed receipts and cell phone records. The following day, December 11th, appears to have been relatively uneventful, with no significant recorded activities or travels. On December 12th, the day before his disappearance, Stephen was seen at his home. A neighbor, identified only as John, reported seeing Stephen and his car at his residence for about 20 or 30 minutes. By 10:30 p.m., both Stephen and his car were gone. This sighting is the last confirmed observation of Stephen in his hometown before his disappearance. The day of December 13th started with a series of phone calls that provided crucial information about Stephen's whereabouts and state of mind. At 8:57 a.m., Stephen received a call from President Greg Webb of his church. Webb asked Stephen to attend an 11 a.m. priesthood executive committee meeting at the ward. Stephen informed Webb that he was in Las Vegas but offered to attend if needed. Webb, who was headed to St. George himself, told Stephen he would cover the meeting. This call is significant for several reasons. First, it confirms Stephen's presence in the Las Vegas area, approximately 120 miles from his home. Second, it suggests that Stephen's presence in Las Vegas was unexpected, as he had prior commitments that he was willing to honor if necessary. Lastly, it shows that he was still engaged with his church responsibilities and maintaining normal communication with his community. At 10:47 a.m., Stephen received another call, this time from Seth Aboud, the ward clerk. He asked Stephen, who was scheduled to officiate the 1 p.m. church service, to make an announcement about a December 16th basketball game. Again, Stephen explained that he couldn't fulfill this duty because he was in Las Vegas. The final known communication with Stephen occurred at 11:15 a.m. Paul Doxey, another church member, attempted to reach Stephen to see if he could attend the PEC meeting, unaware of the earlier conversation with Webb. Stephen once again stated that he was in Las Vegas and couldn't make it back in time for the meeting. The reason for his presence in Las Vegas remains one of the central mysteries of the case. At 11:54 a.m., a home security camera on Savannah Springs Avenue recorded Stephen's white 2003 Chevrolet Cavalier driving into a cul-de-sac. This location was approximately 15 miles south of the Las Vegas Strip, in an upscale residential area. The choice of this particular location remains a mystery, as Stephen had no known connections to the area. 6 minutes later, at precisely noon, the same camera captured a figure believed to be Stephen walking eastbound on the sidewalk. He was dressed in a white shirt and slacks, attire that suggested he might have been prepared for a formal meeting or job interview. Under his left arm, Stephen was carrying what appeared to be a file folder or portfolio. This last image of Stephen provides several important details that have been scrutinized by investigators and family members alike. His clothing choice was notably formal for a Sunday, especially considering he had earlier informed his church that he would be missing services that day. The file folder or portfolio he carried has led to speculation that he might have been headed to a job interview or meeting, which would align with his family's belief that he was in the area seeking employment opportunities. Observers have noted that Stephen's demeanor in the video footage appeared purposeful. He walked with a determined stride, showing no signs of confusion, distress, or disorientation. This behavior suggests that Stephen likely had a specific destination in mind and was not wandering aimlessly or lost. Shortly after the initial sighting, another security camera on the adjacent Evening Light Street captured Stephen's reflection in a car window as he walked north. After Stephen walked out of the camera's view, his movements become a complete mystery. Despite extensive searches of the area and door-to-door inquiries in the neighborhood, no residents reported seeing Stephen that day. This lack of additional sightings is particularly puzzling given that Sun City Anthem is a retirement community where residents are often home and aware of their surroundings. On December 15th, the Sun City Anthem Homeowners Association noticed Stephen's vehicle parked on Savannah Springs Avenue. Concerned about the apparently abandoned vehicle, they began efforts to locate its owner. Inside the car, they found flyers from a window and blind washing business where Stephen had been working. Using this information, they contacted the business and were able to obtain Stephen's contact details. The Homeowners Association left a voicemail message for Stephen's mother on December 16th. However, she didn't hear the message until the following day, December 17th. Upon realizing that no one in the family had spoken to Stephen in a week and unable to locate him, Deanne immediately reported him missing. His brother and sister drove from the Salt Lake City area to St. George to begin searching and eventually into Nevada. They checked jails, morgues, and hospitals, hoping to find any trace of Stephen. Officers went door to door in the Sun City Anthem community where Stephen's car was found. They questioned residents, hoping to find someone who might have seen Stephen on the day of his disappearance. Unfortunately, despite the thorough canvassing, no neighbors reported seeing Stephen in the area on December 13th. Stephen's Chevrolet Cavalier was found to be in working order with half a tank of gas. Inside the car, investigators found a shaving kit, coats, pillows, blankets, and Christmas presents he had recently purchased. However, his cell phone, wallet, and driver's license were missing. It's worth noting that initially, the car was not processed as a crime scene, as it was believed to be simply abandoned rather than evidence of a potential crime. This decision meant that the vehicle was not fingerprinted or formally processed, a fact that later caused some frustration in the investigation. By Christmas 2009, less than 2 weeks after the disappearance, the case had gained significant media attention. News outlets in both Salt Lake City and Las Vegas were reporting on the story, helping to spread awareness and potentially generate new leads. In April 2010, a group of 70 searchers covered a half-mile stretch of open desert south of Henderson Executive Airport in response to a tip. While bone fragments were found, they were not human. Investigators examined Stephen's cell phone records and financial history, but found nothing unusual apart from his recent travels. A single charge to his credit card after his disappearance was an automatic payment to a web hosting company. A search of Stephen's computer and internet browsing history revealed nothing out of the ordinary. His library borrowing history in St. George was also checked but provided no new leads. Stephen kept a diary which investigators examined. The diary mentioned no significant problems beyond his financial issues and his status as a bachelor. Notably, Stephen expressed optimism that both these situations would improve soon. The main theories that arose involved a voluntary disappearance, involvement in illicit activity, random act of violence, accidental death, and more. However, evidence to support these various ideas is scarce and the case remains unsolved.